Hello fellow readers and readeresses. It's been a while since I filmed in the car, and if you've watched any of my other car videos, you know exactly what that means. And if you haven't, well, you should. You know what I hate? Well, hate is a strong word, but do you know what I dislike a medium amount? When people say, you just have to make more time for the things that you love. It's like saying, if you want to catch a rabbit, you just have to make carrot noises, because nobody knows how to make that. We can't make time. In order to use it for things we like, such as reading, we need to take it away from other things we like, such as sleeping and having a life. All this to say, I am exhausted. October was by far the busiest month I've had in a very long time, which is why I only posted 2 videos during the whole thing, and why I had to reduce my sleep to barely sufficient in order to be able to read enough, which I did. And I think I did quite well. Before we dive into the wrap-up, let's look at the TBR that we were working with. And I have no clue why I say we whenever I say this. We had Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, which was a prompt cards pick for the prompt, read a book based on true story. Then we had 3 Apples Fell from the Sky by Narine Abgaryan, which was another prompt cards pick to read a book that was a gift. Then we had Fullmetal Alchemist Volume 9 by Hiromu Awakawa, which was a series-style landing, as well as a prompt cards pick to read a book that has an adaptation. This was possible because of Frodo's special skill to cover 2 prompts with 1 book. Then we have The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, which was another prompt cards pick to read a short book under 300 pages. Next was The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which was yet another prompt cards pick to read a book by a favorite author, followed by Swan by Robert McCammon, which was yet another prompt cards pick to read a book with mostly orange on the cover. Then we had The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci, which was a bookshelf jar pick, Death Masks by Jim Butcher, which was another prompt cards pick to read a book that features an animal/non-human companion, Ordinary Grace by William Kent Krueger, which was a free choice for completing the map, and The Enemy by Lee Child, which was a buzzword reading challenge pick for the prompt relationships. A hefty TBR, as you can see, and I am happy to report that through sheer stubbornness and complete refusal to socialize beyond the mandatory minimum, I was able to read it all. Nearly. Now let's go through all the books in the order in which I finished them. Starting with The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. This is an adult classic murder mystery and the 6th book in the Hercule Poirot series. I'm not gonna say anything about the plot of this book because it's brilliant and I don't want to spoil it. Having read 10 or so of the Hercule Poirot books as well as a few other Agatha Christie books, I can safely say that the twist of this one surprised me tremendously. I'd somehow managed to avoid spoilers for this one for so many years and didn't suspect the correct person for 1 second. Even though looking back all the evidence was there. I will admit I didn't really like the conclusion, but that was mostly for ethical reasons. Other than that, the book was executed flawlessly and I very much enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars. By the way, if you're not too much into series, every Poirot book can be read as a standalone, including this one. However, in my opinion, in order to appreciate its circumstantial originality, it's best to read it after a few other Poirot books. The second book that I finished was the biggest book on my TBR and one of the biggest books that I've read this year and kind of in general, and that is Swan by Robert McCammon. This is an adult, standalone, post-apocalyptic horror with somewhat of a strong supernatural element. The book is set in a relatively contemporary USA, and while it starts with a strong political plot, it quickly shifts the focus to the more individual experiences of a few people and a more personal aspect of suffering and survival. I'm not gonna lie to you, the book is brutal. It doesn't spare you anything. And what sets it apart, and for me took it from good to great, was the masterful portrayal of the emotional trauma caused by physical injuries. For example, we don't just see a bomb go off and then people either dying or surviving it. We focus on the exact moment it happens and the exact experience of it hitting you second by second. The author somehow utilized every sense to describe that experience, and it was sickening. I loved it. He then took the big destruction and used it as mere background for the seemingly small, seemingly inconsequential losses caused by the events, be it physical or emotional, and it really helped make this insane story feel real. And despite the fact that the book is huge, it was so quick to read. I went through the whole thing in less than a week while having almost no time for reading. Oh, and it's one of the few books lately who managed to hold all of my attention, and I didn't feel the need to read 3 other books simultaneously. Now, the first 10-ish pages from the book were a little more dense, but after that the story became way more entertaining, and after about 100 pages it was nearly impossible to put it down. If I have one criticism, it's that I wish that the ending had been a little more more brutal and devastating. Not that it wasn't at all, but I just wanted a bit more of a gut punch. Still, I gave the book 5 stars and I highly recommend. Next, I finished Death Masks by Jim Butcher, which is an adult urban fantasy and book number 5 in the Dresden Files series. Here, I don't have much to say. I'm not usually big on urban fantasy, but this one I absolutely adore. Harry is a wizard detective from Chicago who is broke but with style, lives in a basement essentially, has a few friends and a ton of enemies, helps the Chicago police to investigate crimes of magical nature, and above all else, manages to always get himself mixed up in the nastiest trouble one can imagine. Basically, Harry Potter for pessimistic grown-ups. This was yet another great entry in the series, and what makes it stand out for me at least was the author's brilliant interpretation of the interaction between ancient mythology and contemporary religion. I also very much enjoyed the expansion of backstory for one particular side character that we see in the very first book. I think he's introduced as the first or second side character in the series at all, and I'm really hoping to see a more prominent role for him in the future. What I didn't like was the somewhat rushed resolution of some plot points and the overabundance of side characters, which took away some of the focus without delivering too much substance. But as a whole, I really enjoyed myself and I gave the book a little more than 4 stars. Next, I finished The Enemy by Lee Child, which is an adult military thriller and the 8th book in the Jack Reacher series. This series is one of my favorite no-brain reads, and that's not to say that the books have no plot or substance. On the contrary, there's always deep, well-developed plot, often very elaborate and complex. But for one thing, Lee Child's writing flows so easily. Short sentences, to the point, very descriptive, nothing to confuse you. And then he lays out his story so well, and you trust him to get you there safely, so you kind of just relax and enjoy the ride. It's a strangely comforting experience considering how much murder there is on page and how detailed the author is in describing it. In this one, we go back in time to Reacher's military years, and we get to witness a very pivotal moment in both his career and his life in general. I really enjoyed it, and I kind of hope to see more of his backstory in the future. I reduced the rating slightly though, because frankly, I kind of got fed up with the phrase, "I said nothing," and if you think that's not a big deal, I urge you to try and count how many times this phrase was used in this book. I tried myself, and I gave up at around 60-something. Other than that, the only complaint I have is about the slightly too abstract main conflict, which required a little too much analysis in order to understand, while not being particularly exciting on the whole. At least not to me. The story, however, was great, and I really enjoyed it, so I gave the book 4 stars. Next, I finished The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is an adult, standalone, post-apocalyptic novel by what I am coming to consider to be my all-time favorite author. I feel like this man knew I will be here one day and reading, and so he wrote a book that stabbed me right in the soul repeatedly. I swear, every word he wrote was the right one, and if a poem could be written in prose, this is exactly what it would look like. We have a devastating story set in a post-apocalyptic USA, and we follow a father and his son who walk the road to the sea, hoping to survive the harsh winter. Humanity is almost gone, and it seems that all that is left of it, besides those two, is the ugly part. And there's this overwhelming sense of loneliness. Like, they haven't so much survived this calamity, but were rather left behind, which is why they are even more precious to each other. Then they set out along the blacktop in the gunmetal light, shuffling through the ash, each the other's world entire. Beautiful. We see small, seemingly inconsequential scenes of little losses, which only come to emphasize how much was lost, as well as scenes of little joys, which somehow emphasize it even more. There is this scene where the two of them share a can of Coke that they found, and this was so small, but so powerful. I don't think I'll ever look at a can of soda the same way. I won't talk much more about the book because I can drone on and on about it, but I'm just gonna say that the ending was perfect, and when I read it, I just wanted to stand and applaud. And maybe I did. You don't know. You know, it's funny that this month I read 2 post-apocalyptic novels set in the US by 2 great authors, and while they were both brilliant, they were so very different. Like, the 2 authors were given the same assignment, and they both aced it, but in their own way. Like, McCammon wrote 900 pages that you can read in one breath, while McCarthy only needed 1/3 of that to create a book to completely eviscerate your soul. Really great stuff. If there's one thing I don't like about McCarthy's books, is that I can't seem to stop reading them even after I've already finished them. I just keep on going back and rereading parts of it. It was the same with Blood Meridian. I have no idea why. Anyway, I guess you won't be surprised to hear that I gave the book 5 stars. Speaking of 5-star reads, Ordinary Grace by William Kent Krueger. This is a combination of a post-war historical fiction, murder mystery, and a coming-of-age contemplation of life. Set in a small town and following a 13-year-old boy and his family, the book tackles the subjects of PTSD, loneliness, religion and faith, family issues, love, disillusionment with life, and many, many more. All of it was written masterfully, and nearly every sentence was a work of art. Frankly, I'm a little worried that I won't be able to do the book justice because I don't have the author's skill with words, but I'll do my best. I mean, look at these sentences. It was a summer in which death, in visitation, assumed many forms. Moonlight pooled on the bedroom floor. Outside the chirr of crickets and other night bugs gave life to the dark. Lovely. Night was the dark of the soul, and being up in an hour when the rest of the world was dead with sleep gave me a sinful thrill. You know that feeling? As if the whole world is sleeping and you're the only watcher remaining, like you've been made privy to its secrets. Kinda makes you wonder why we bother sleeping at all. I really liked how he took his time to follow every character's story, and he did so with respect. There are some heavy subjects that are tackled here, and I love the seamless thoughtfulness with which they were handled. The author also gave me an interesting and unexpected perspective on a few things. As for the mystery, it was well crafted and had a satisfying resolution, though I will admit I was able to guess all the twists, though that did not diminish my enjoyment from the story one bit. It all made sense, and the way it was served was beautiful and satisfying. I highly recommend, and I'm very thankful to the lovely gentleman who unknowingly brought it to my attention. As I mentioned, I gave it 5 stars, and I'm very much looking forward to reading more by this author. Next, I finished The Savior's Champion by Jenna Moreci. This is an adult fantasy romance and the first book in the Savior series. Boy, did I want to not hate this book, and I can't say that I hated it, I just really didn't like it. The book is self-published by Jenna, who is a YouTuber popular for her writing advice, which she delivers in a simple and what I consider to be an entertaining way. Unfortunately, her book, while also simple, did not entertain much. The writing style was not great, the plot was a mess of random scenes and inconsistencies, there was a twist that one could see from 2 towns over, and the characters were such cliches. An attempt was made at edgy dialogue, and sadly, the attempt was more apparent than the desired edge. There are some spicy scenes here, and honestly, I have no opinion. The whole thing was so underwhelming, and you know, I kinda knew it would be. Truthfully, every author who I follow on YouTube and whose book I read, I've been disappointed by. I feel like often people who are great at speaking aren't great at writing, and I know I'm just generalizing based on very limited experience, and there are numerous examples to prove me wrong, but my experience is my experience, and I can't not draw conclusions, you know? Maybe there's discrepancy between my taste in written and spoken entertainment, and maybe I just like watching people whose writing I will hate. And it's maybe why I didn't pick the book for years after I purchased it. I guess I kinda knew it was gonna be subpar. Either way, I did not enjoy this book. It mostly bored me, so I gave it 2.5 stars, and I will not be continuing with the series. Next, I finished 3 Apples Fell from the Sky by Narine Abgaryan. This is a standalone adult historical fiction set in an Armenian village on the backdrop of some terrible historical events. We follow a handful of people who are mostly in their sunset years. They live their small lives, they face the days, they endure more than is fair, and they become slowly forgotten by the world. You might not know this about me, but I grew up in a village myself, not in Armenia, but in another godforsaken country, and all of this felt a little too real at times. It was beautifully written, and heart-wrenching, and funny, and hopeful. It was also strangely poetic, and it made me emotional in the weirdest places. Let me tell you, I will never not feel a mixture of joy and sadness every time I look at a peacock from now on. The book was beautiful through and through, and I am so thankful to the people who recommended it to me, and to the fantastic woman who made me this lovely gift. I am forever grateful. I gave the book 5 stars. And the last book I read in October, I read on the very last day of the month, and that is Fullmetal Alchemist Volume 9 by Hiromu Arakawa. This is the 9th installment of my favorite manga series, and it was absolutely outstanding. It was fast-paced, there were twists, reveals, double games, and very clever deception. There was finally some honesty delivered by some characters which I had hoped to see for a long time, and there was some dishonesty, but in a good way, that set up the next volume to be even even better than this one, potentially. I don't know. Honestly, I am itching to continue the series. A great entry. I gave it 5 stars and I'm really happy I read it. And those are all the books that I read in October. In addition to them, I am still reading Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, and I'm having such a good time with it, but I will talk more about it in my November wrap-up. So to summarize, in the month of October, I read 9 books, which amounted to a total of 3,747 pages. In terms of genre, I read 1 classic, 2 fantasies, 2 historical fictions, 1 horror, 1 manga, and 1 sci-fi. In terms of formatting, I read 8 paperbacks and 1 ebook, and in terms of sourcing, I owned 8 of the books and borrowed 1. So that's it. I am really satisfied with those numbers, but even more importantly, I read some of the most impactful book in the month of October, and what's better than that? I hope you had a beautiful reading month and that even better ones are coming to you. Thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to see what else I managed to sneak read in October with some drinks, check out this video. Bye!